Okay, today in this video we're going to talk about paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is something that we usually talk about in our intermediate and advanced level reading and writing classes, but I'm going to talk about it in our advanced grammar class. First, we need to talk about what paraphrasing is. A simple definition of paraphrasing is to explain an idea with new sentences. Many people say, explain the idea in your own words. I like to say in new sentences because it's not just about changing the words, as we will see in just a minute. So it's when you have an idea that you learned about from someone and you want to explain that idea. But you need to use your own words. You need to use new sentences to explain it. And sometimes you might keep some of the same words. You might keep a key word or an important word that is the only way to describe that concept, which is why I like to say it's with a new, and that's an E, a new sentence. So new sentences. You might keep some of the same words. You might change some of the words, but you need to explain the same idea with new sentences. You want to keep the same meaning. So I always say same meaning, but new sentences or new way to explain. So it's the same meaning. You want to explain the idea. You don't want to change the idea. You want to explain the same idea, but you need to use your own words, which means you need to create some new sentences. I cannot tell you how many times I always have students ask me, okay, how do I do that? Okay, how do I do that? And the easy way is by saying, read it and explain what you understand. But for international students learning the language, that becomes a little bit more complicated. So I have broken it down into 3 steps. And I always tell students try to do 2 out of the 3. So let's take a look at how we do it. There are 3 steps or 3 factors in creating a paraphrase. The first thing you want to do is try to change some of the vocabulary. Change the words, change the vocabulary. Find a synonym. It has to be a synonym that works in the same situation. So be careful with your synonym choosing. Be careful when you choose synonyms. Not all synonyms are created equal. You have to choose the word that fits the situation and fits in that context or in that meaning. But one thing to do is to change the vocabulary. Another thing to do is to change the grammar. Change the grammar means maybe you change an adjective into an adjective clause. Or maybe you combine 2 sentences by adding in a noun clause. Or maybe you change from passive grammar into active grammar, or active grammar into passive grammar. So change the grammar is another way. And then sometimes you don't have to change the grammar, but you can just change the sentence order, just the word order in the sentence. So I'm going to say word order. Or maybe, or like sentence focus. We can look at some examples of that. So those are the 3 steps, and I usually tell students to try to do at least 2 of the 3. So 2 is the best number. If you only do 1, for example, if you only change the vocabulary, then it will be academic dishonesty, it will be plagiarism because it's still the same sentence. If you only change the grammar, it will also be academic dishonesty because you're keeping all of the same words. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. If we look at an example sentence where someone says, I can post these on Canvas, but this is from U of M, Flint, University of Michigan, and it's their webpage about surviving college. And so they're talking about the general course load. If you want to pause the video and look on Canvas for this PDF, you can find it and you can read it slowly. But what I'm looking at right here is maybe, let's imagine I'm doing some research on how long students need to, how often students study, or how much students study per week. So in this one, I am going to look at, let's see, full-time is 12 to 18 credits per semester. And for every 1 credit hour in which you enroll, you will spend approximately 2 to 3 hours outside of class studying. Therefore, 3 credit hours, which is 1 course, equals 3 hours in class, equals 6 to 9 hours per week of studying. So imagine I want to use this information in my own essay. Maybe I'm writing an essay about student study hours. I want to use this information in my own essay, but I cannot copy it. So these parts are a little bit interesting because we've got some facts, we've got some numbers, and then this sentence in particular is the sentence that I want to paraphrase. So when I'm doing it, the first thing you need to do before you can paraphrase, you have to read it. And you have to read it carefully and make sure that you understand all of the details. Step 2 in your paraphrasing is to make some notes. I always make notes when I'm paraphrasing. I might make notes directly on the paper, or I might make notes on a separate sheet of paper. In this one, I'm going to make notes directly on the paper. So full-time equals 12 to 18 credit hours per semester. And this part down here says 3 credit hours equals 1 course. For me, I need that information up here. 3 hours equals 1 course. So I'm going to add that up there. So when I look at this, I can see 12 to 18 credit hours, 3 hours, 1 course. So this equals 4 to 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, not 4 to maybe 6 classes per semester. So 4 to 6 classes per semester. All right, so again, 3 credit hours equals 1 class. If 3 hours equals 1 class, 12 hours equals 4, 18 hours equals 6, and that's per semester. Again, per semester, per semester. So if you understand the information that you read, you can do some math with some facts. If you have some facts, you can do some math and you can make it into a little bit different information. But let's take a look at my sentence. For every 1 credit hour in which you will enroll, you will spend approximately 2 to 3 hours outside of class studying. So 1 credit hour equals 2 to 3 hours. Well, if we know that 3 credit hours, oops, I should probably put that those are credit hours, not hours. If we know that 3 credit hours equals 1 course, how many credit hours are we talking about for 1 class? That's right down here. So we've got 3 credit hours equals 1 course, which means 3 hours inside of class per week, which means you will spend 2 to 3 hours for each 1 credit hour. That's how many hours you are in class. Credit hour means how many hours you are in class. And if you don't know what credit hour means, Google it. You have to understand what you're reading before you can paraphrase. 3 hours in class times 2 or 3 equals 6 to 9 hours of study time per week. So the note that I'm going to make here is 1 class is approximately, and instead of saying 6 to 9 hours per week, I'm going to pick a number in the middle. Is approximately 7.5, because that's right in the middle, hours per week. So if we say 6 to 9, the middle of that is 7, and this is a symbol that I use when I'm making notes for approximately. All right, if that doesn't make sense to you, again, pause the video, look up any words that you don't know, but I'm going to move on and I'm going to write my paraphrase. My paraphrase is I want to explain this idea using my own sentence, my own words. So I'm trying to avoid copying. And if I do that on my own paper, I'm going to say something like, according to, and I need to use my citation. According to University of Michigan, Flint. I know I'm left-handed, so it's a little hard to see. Flint's page on, let's see, I'm going to add web page on, maybe I'll change this to called Surviving College. And I accessed it in 2017, and I think when I accessed it, I didn't print this part out, but it said it was updated in 2017. So I'm going to put the date. So I've got my reporting verb here, according to, blah, 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 and then a comma after my entire report, comma. Now comes my paraphrase. So this information, but in my own words. So I'm going to kind of talk you through my process here. Let's see. I like this sentence. I think I want to start with this. For every 1 credit hour in which you enroll, you spend approximately 2 to 3 hours outside of class studying. So I'm going to try to change that. And I'm going to start with this part instead of starting with the 1 credit hour. So I'm going to say most students, I'm keeping it general because they didn't give an exact subject. It says you, and I think they're talking to the student. Most students study 2 to 3 hours per credit. Instead of saying credit hour, I think I'm going to change that, and I'm going to say per class hour, because I know that 3 credit hours equals 1 course, and they tell me that that means 3 hours per week, so I can see that credit hours equals the hours in class. And again, paraphrasing, it takes time. Most students study 2 to 3 hours per class hour. I should probably add per week. And maybe I might actually want to move this per week over to 2 to 3 hours per week per class hour, because it's hours per week. But it doesn't really change it completely. Okay, then I'm going to look at this 4 to 6 classes per semester, and I want to look at this 1 class equals 7.5 hours per week. So again, it's not a perfect thing. I'm going to zoom out just a little so we can get all of this into one screen. My next sentence, because I'm paraphrasing a lot of information, it's not going to fit into one sentence. My next sentence, I'm going to maybe start with something like this means, because I'm explaining more about this information. This means that, this means something, so I've got my noun clause. This means that each class, for each class, the average study time is 7.5 hours per week. So again, if you start with this means, you are explaining more or defining the information that you just presented. You're re-explaining. This means that for each class, the average study time is 7 hours per week. I think I'm just going to put a period there. I think I want to end my sentence there. And I'm going to use a transition word, a connector word, to then finish my idea because I want to talk about this 4 to 6 hours per semester. I haven't talked about that yet, so I'm going to add that in at the end. Thus, comma, a student who is taking 4 to 6 classes, which is full-time, as we see in this study, as we see from this information. Maybe other schools have different credit hours, but as we can see, 4 to 6 classes is full-time at U of M. Thus, a student who is taking 4 to 6 classes, and I have an extra S here, so I'm just going to erase that, comma, will likely, which means probably, will likely need to study, let's see, I've got 7.5 hours for one class, so 7.5 times 4 would be 30. You can check my math, I didn't use a calculator. And maybe I'll say about, because we know that that's the average. About 30 hours per week outside of classes, because I have more than one. Okay. Again, if we look at this one, it was pretty hard to change synonyms. Instead of saying credit hour, I said in-class hour, class hour. But to change the words 2 and 3, it's a little bit difficult. So instead of just changing those words, I changed the numbers. I changed it to, instead of saying 6 to 9 hours, I picked a number in the middle. Instead of saying, no, this one I kept 2 to 3 hours. Instead of saying 12 to 18 credit hours, I said 4 to 6 classes. So I changed some of the words. You can't change the word semester. There's no other way to say that. Unless you want to say, usually a semester is about 16 weeks. So you could possibly say that, but I think that's a little bit too confusing. And then, instead of starting here, I chose to start down here. So I'm changing the order, and I started, when I did this sentence, for example, I started with this part first, and then I went to that part. So this is a cause and effect situation. I started with the effect and then went to the cause. If we look at my final product, I have my reporting according to the University of Michigan Flint's webpage called Surviving College, and this is the date. Most students study 2 to 3 hours per week per class hour. This means that for each class, the average study time is 7.5 hours per week. Thus, a student who is taking 4 to 6 classes, that's an extra comma, I don't need that, editing, will likely need to study about 30 hours per week outside of classes. So this is an example of an academic paraphrase. I will post a few more academic paraphrasing practices, but I'd like to remind you that paraphrasing means you explain an idea with new sentences. So my idea was from this web page, and actually I took it from, this is kind of a list and some sentences. So I did some paraphrasing from a list and some paraphrasing from the sentences. So I kept the same idea, the same information, but I created new sentences. I have the same meaning, but I explain it in a new way. How did I do it? I changed some of the vocabulary, which also included changing some of the numbers. Instead of saying 12 to 14 credit hours, I said 12 to 18 credit hours, I said 4 to 6 classes. So I also had to change some of the numbers if there are numbers in there. I changed the grammar a little bit. I added some adjective clauses if you go back and look at that. And then I definitely changed the word orders or the sentence focus. And you could see that one very clearly in that one sentence. I didn't change active to passive grammar. But in this sentence, For every 1 credit hour in which you enroll, you will spend 2 to 3 hours outside of class studying. I chose to start with this part and then focus on the 1 credit. So if we look at my sentence, it was most students study 2 to 3 hours per week per class hour, and I said class hour instead of credit hour. So I changed some of the vocabulary and I changed the sentence focus. So remember, paraphrasing is something that we talk about quite frequently in our academic reading and writing classes, but it also requires a lot of grammar skill in order to change the grammar and to change the word order. I will create another video and I